What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? This is another edition of Grove Sessions. This is actually a Grove workshop, and it's sponsored by Leon Speakers and the Amplify Fellowship. The mission of the Amplify Fellowship, as you should know, is to provide resources and access to African American musical artists to encourage free expression untethered by social inequity. We commit to leveraging business relationships and community partnerships to amplify the voices of Black artists, encourage artistic ownership of their craft, and strengthening our connections with communities in need. The Amplify Fellowship intends to provide African American musical artists and musical related artisans in our area with the infrastructure to grow, creating great music and building competencies essential to success in the modern music industry. That is what today's workshop is all about. As a result, the area's musical community will grow in quality and collaboration and become a burgeoning element of the diverse arts and business activity within the area. You can visit amplify-fellowship.com where you can make a donation to the program. Tonight, we are very honored to have a very special guest with us. The number one word that comes to mind when I think about this brother is solid, all the way around. Solid when it comes to being a man of his word, solid when it comes to his integrity, solid when it comes to what I've seen him do as a father, and solid as a businessman. I want to just take a minute and introduce Brother Brandon Scarber.
What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, man?
ASIR Consulting, Varsity Media Group, brand manager, independent artist management, project director. And in looking at your bio, brother, you run the gamut of business in entanglement, so to speak. All of your skills, they bounce right directly off of each other. I mean, to say what you've done from a music and entertainment perspective, business consulting, being the president of a label, promotions and radio, COO of a website in Detroit, DetroitRap.com, as well as real strong strategic partnerships across the board. Tonight, we get a chance to learn from you.
Gotcha.
So thank you so much for being here.
No doubt, no doubt. Just minor correction. That's former COO DetroitRap.com. I don't want no backlash from the current staff and members over there. Yeah,
absolutely,
but,
absolutely. Shout out to DetroitRap.com
foundation, man.
Absolutely. So we're not gonna waste a lot of time. We know that you have a lot to share today. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna turn it over to you, brother.
All right. So, well, again, I don't know if I should say what time of day it is because I don't know when it's going to get broadcast. But hello again to everyone. Hello again to everyone. My name is Brandon Scarber again. Basically, business consultant. That's like my working title that I like to use when it comes to me moving around in the realm of music and entertainment. I've had many different titles that I've worn before. I currently wear many different titles, but I think it's simple to just kind of communicate through that lens of just being a business consultant. And so the presentation you see before you is my company. ASIR Consulting is one of two companies that I own. Well, technically three. ASIR Consulting, Varsity Music Group, and then Varsity Street Publishing, which is a department within Varsity Music Group that handles all of my song administration and publishing needs on the creative end. With that being said, go to our first slide. So company history. ASIR Consulting was founded back in 2014. So it's been around, give or take, 6 to 7 years here locally in the city of Detroit and serving the Michigan community and most of Wayne County. As you can see, the roles that I've maintained, I would like to say that my passion is creativity in terms of being a creative director. So I love working with talent in the studio. I love writing treatments and shooting videos. I love working on graphics and websites and coming up with marketing and strategic promotion plans. So I would say that's kind of like my passion. And then I would say my skill is more so along the lines of marketing, promotions, branding, and dealing with, documentation, so to speak. So usually I tell people I'm like the poor man's lawyer. So to kind of save you a little bit of money, a little bit of headway, for a small fee, you can come see me, and I'll do my best to assist you in your needs and whatever you have going on. So these are some of my basic business functions. These are all the different things that I do. So again, highlighting the marketing promotions aspect, highlighting the publishing services, highlighting the startup business management. These are my area of expertise, things that I went to school for. As Rob mentioned earlier, I have a very diverse resume and background. I attended the University of Michigan for my master's in public administration. My undergraduate degree is in econ and business, double major from Kalamazoo College. So that's just a little bit about my educational background. So going into what we have to discuss tonight, I was pretty much given the topics of basically the indie process, behind the scenes is management and what that all entails. And in my experience in working here locally in the city of Detroit, and like I said, within the state of Michigan and regionally within the Midwest, over the last 10 years, these are some things that I came to know, kind of like some hallmarks, if you will, that I will be sharing with you all tonight. So number one in my book, in terms of being a manager, you basically want to, how can I say it? You basically want to know what you're managing and if you have something to manage. A lot of times artists, production companies, existing situations, they want you to come in and play a role as a manager, but the artist's career or the content or activity they may have at the time doesn't warrant management. And what I like to highlight in this first paragraph or first bullet point is that they have to already be showing an earning potential, because one, you've got to be compensated. So whether you take a percentage of revenue, whether you take a percentage of publishing, whether you take a percentage, whatever flat rate fee they may charge up front in terms of how they do their fees and scheduling as it pertains to feature work, booking, merchandising, you want to have an idea of how the economics or how commerce is being done for that particular artist, client, and their company. And then their general resume, what have they done in their tenure since they've been up and running? So you have to have something to manage as a manager. Number two, I call it study and research. You have to be aware of what's going on in your current market locally, on the state level and regionally, and to some degree nationally and internationally. But definitely you want to know what's going on with your locale. So you need to know who the influencers are. You need to know what platforms are available. Has your particular artist or client or company, have they accessed the majority of the platforms that exist? Have they accessed a percentage of the platforms exist? So that way you kind of know ground zero, day one, what to implement and what you're trying to do. Number three, this is the biggest of them all. You got to have capital resources, aka the money bag. Any situation, it takes money to make money. So whether the artist or client or company has an investor, whether they have some type of crowdfunding, whether it's private investing, whether it's contributors capital, where they kind of got a dual system where everybody kind of chipping into the pot, however they're getting things paid for, you have to be aware of what the financial foundation is so you know what you can and cannot bring to the table, know what your limitations are financially. And then number four, you got to be able to network, have soft skills, be able to walk into a room, understand who's in the room, understand where the energy is in the room, and how to proceed naturally to be able to negotiate and network your way to future opportunities, build your resource base in terms of your networks, common day things. If you ever work in corporate America at any point in time, or worked a 9-to-5 type of gig, you understand there's a hierarchy, a social hierarchy within that space. And so you kind of want to apply that same logic and that same practicality to when you're doing music and entertainment, when you enter in a room. And then lastly, this is kind of hard, especially for a lot of upstarts, is quote unquote being a yes man. Making sure that you're not agreeing with everything that your client, artist, or company want to do, because in order for them to grow and develop, there's going to be some challenging decisions that's going to have to be made. There's going to be some things that may not align with their prior interests or concerns, because you're pushing them to be their best. You're pushing them to be outside of their comfort zone. And so these are kind of like my quick 5 bullet points on independent management. Don't know if my man Rod want to jump in, so he might want to say something, so I'm gonna give him a second. I can't hear you, brother.
I do. I'm sorry. I do. So can you speak to each one of these as it pertains to when an artist is not in a position to have an individual or a group of individuals who are able to do some of the footwork that's here. Can you give an overview of just what some strategies are to make sure that they're able to account for these 5 things?
Well, number one, have a plan. You should have a 90-day plan and a 6-month plan. If you're really cooking, you want to have a 9-month to a year plan. And simply that plan can be, single releases that you may plot out for the year or the quarter. It could be a project push and release. It could be, increasing your booking. So maybe you want to, take over the market in terms of performances. So you should have, 2 to 3 performances lined up every couple weeks to a month. It could be launching your merchandise if you already up and running and you just want to add your merchandise into what you're doing. But basically on a minimum level, just have a plan how you plan to execute your business within at least 90 days to 6 months.
Okay. And we know that many artists are funded, they're self-funded.
Correct.
So what are some things strategically for, like you talked about releases, and then there's the argument about, doing a bunch of single releases, maybe with videos or whatnot, maybe doing an EP or even doing an entire project. From a financial standpoint, from somebody that's just starting out and they have a minimal bag, is it good to be able to create something that is comprehensive and shows the variety and diversity within who they are and what they can create? Or is it better to, and we're talking about release, I guess you could create as much as you can, but is it better to do a single and then an album, or just continue to release singles as you build up some credit in the community?
I guess I'm gonna answer. Start with the money part first. So realistically, just to put things in perspective, to break an unknown, brand new talent, no matter their age demographic, no matter their race demographic, just somebody who's talented, whether they're rapping, singing, or a combination of both, producing or instrumentalist, or combination of both, or all of the above, it takes at least 100,000 on an independent level to break somebody brand new. And that's all the creative overhead, all the business overhead, releases, videos, hiring a publicist to really make a push marketing wise on a regional and national level, dealing with DJs and record pools and radio mix show, traveling, in and around the state and within the region. So that's kind of like just to put in perspective. But, for common day, ordinary people who have a dream, that may be a bit out of reach. So dialing it down some, I've consistently heard minimum 25,000.
Wow.
So 100,000 will probably be the average max for a brand new talent, and 25,000 would be the minimum. So if you do that over the span of 12 months, give or take, you're looking at about $1,500 to $2,000 a month to fund your career as an upstart.
Wow.
And I've even taken it further from my consulting background and told people half of that. So at minimum, you want to spend at least $10,000 in your career to start. And that's just to get you moving around locally for what I know of that's available in the city of Detroit. So at least 10,000, give or take 500 to 1,000 a month. If you can't afford to put that up for your career, this might not be, the field for you.
That's a difficult pill to swallow. And I think I like what you said in terms of a delineation, because the majority of people who we encounter are people who have careers in other positions, careers in other places, careers in other fields. And it's not as though the interest is in solely doing it for fun, but they're trying to see growth.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think that what you're saying is, when a person is in the position to need a manager, those are definitely, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, when a person is in the position to need a manager, is something that they are intending on doing for a career, they're going full speed ahead. This is where they are putting their energies and resources and tools towards. Am I correct?
Absolutely. But I had this conversation all the time with my current team, my current partners, and the talent that I represent currently. I think it's a fundamental breakdown of when you make that transition from doing it professionally to kind of doing it as an outlet and or passion or hobby, which the latter is kind of all in the same. You know, outlet, passion, or hobby is kind of all within the same, you know, just different ways of describing the same thing.
Yes.
But it's a thin line, it's a blurry line when you transition from to being something professional. It's thin, it's real thin. And a lot of times it kind of happens by mistake because they invite somebody to the studio. They might play the music haphazardly for friends or family. And from that initial feedback of, oh, this is dope, or this is nice, you should run with this, then the initial thoughts begin to flow of, okay, how do I legitimize this and how do I do this? And a lot of people, unfortunately, come into this completely in the dark, completely unaware of the real financial requirement overall that it takes to work your music. And you see the historical stagnation of, you know, for example, this might have been years ago, but it might still ring true. Like the average video on YouTube, just think of all the videos on YouTube from artists and musicians. The average video, the lifespan of a video at one point in time was 500 views on average. And just think about how many people you may know or know of through your education space and working in music who've tried it and their video might have stayed at that for 2-3 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And when you think about in the streaming era, it takes 1,500 individual single sales to equate to one album. And just think about how many people who could barely sell 100 singles to start at $1. So that's just $100, you know, grand total. Think about your average open mic that in the venue that holds anywhere between 200 to 250 people. You know, people can barely get half the people in there.
Right.
It's not family or friends. So these are like real, true independent benchmarks on a small scale that kind of lets you know where you stand as a business in terms of trying to do music when you're getting off the porch early on.
Absolutely. I get it. That's all I had.
My man.
I'm just trying to speak for everybody. It's people that are in the process of trying to, you know, secure a bag to be able to go, you know, 100%, you know, and then there are also individuals that's picking up gigs here and there, selling their, you know, project here and there. And I think that what you're saying is what you're showing is this is the criteria for being able to participate at a certain level. And everything from that, everything below that, I hate to say below that, everything before that is scaled back.
Bingo.
But the principles remain the same. You have to have capital. You have to have money to be able to market yourself. You have to have money to be able to get product in front of people. You have to be able to develop relationships. You got to do your research. So the principles are still the same, bro.
Right. And you'll be amazed. Even people who quote unquote are considered legends in our community still struggle with that fundamental understanding of how to operate as a business fiscally and what that means as far as discipline on a weekly, monthly, and yearly level. Because a lot of it is perception. You know, the perception is, oh, this is music. It's not like school. I don't have to study. I don't have to practice to show myself approved. I'm not clocking in no hourly job. You know, whatever the inspiration strikes, whatever moves me, I could just book some time or create my own home setup, create what I create, and then put it out. And what's going to be is what's going to be.
And people will love it, and people will see it, and people will run across it, and everything. And I think that one of one of the things we frequently talk about is infrastructure. You got to have the infrastructure for people to be able to access your music. Your music can be the greatest in the world. You can be the greatest rapper, especially when talking to young people. You can be the greatest rapper in the world, the greatest guitar player or whatnot. But if you want to do it professionally, it comes down to relationships. It comes down to having the things in place to be seen and be heard. So I hear what you're saying.
Absolutely. So that kind of ties into the next slide. So the next slide I have for you all, is indie networking. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the management slide and basically what we just discussed. Like, you got to know your market. So you have to know who's doing what in terms of events. You know, where are the open mics happening? Where are the opportunities for exposure at radio? You know, who are the main personalities? Who are the main DJs? Who are the main promoters? Who are the managers of these spots and venues and clubs within your locale? What major platforms? Is there a podcast platform, internet radio platform, satellite radio platform? Is it an opportunity where maybe the station is doing a Friday night cypher, or they're doing a local music show that may air in the wee hours of the morning, where they're playing local talent? Like, you have to understand what's going on in your market and begin to try to build your database and become resourceful in establishing these relationships with these people. And this is what makes you powerful as an independent manager. Then you have to travel to other markets. So usually the good rule of thumb is 100 to 200 miles outside of your location is a good plot to start to build your base. So for Detroit, that would be Toledo, that would be Milwaukee, that would be Chicago,
Flint,
that would be Flint, that would be Philadelphia and PA. So just kind of give you an idea of just that general radius of where you want to try to build relationships and establish yourself in those other markets. And then don't be afraid to have some doors closed in your face, because when you starting out and you're not coming into the game under someone else's banner who's already respected, if you're not being referred in and you just a brand new face on the scene, there's going to be a lot of no's and a lot of doors get closed initially until you kind of prove your value and prove your worth and what you have going on. And it generally starts with the product. So if you push your music, let the music speak for itself. If you bring in a service, you open up a studio, or you picked up a camera and you're doing videography or photography, let your work speak for itself. And over time, people are going to see that value. And especially if your price points is good, or you're not beating people over the head with pricing, you know, people going to want to deal with you because they're trying to get what they got to get done for them and theirs. And lastly, have some contacts in some high places. You know, everybody got to know at least one somebody, because that one somebody that you know may put you in another pool of networks of a lot of somebodies. So everybody got to at least know somebody in a high position. If you can't have more than one, that's great, but at least know at least one somebody that you can get some strings pulled, you know, to be able to get things done. Because that's the first thing that any artist or company is going to ask you when they bring you on board as a manager or part of a management team is, you know, what rooms can you get me in? What platforms can you get me on? Like, what opportunities can you bring for me to the table? That's going to be one of the first questions you can get asked as a manager.
And my follow-up to that is, you've sat on both sides of that. You've taken artists to the market, and you've also been the market to a degree, in terms of artists looking towards you as the provider of a platform for them. I think about UHHA. I think
Correct.
about you know, some of the other things that you did where you had the opportunity to display, to put artists in a platform that gave them the ability to shine. The Four Corners podcast, things of that nature. What advice do you have for artists who are, because I guess what advice do you have for artists to stand out in those situations? Not only to potential fans, but because one thing I like to say is, when you're in those rooms, everybody has an agenda.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? It's the people who will be your fans are also people who could manage you, or could put a bag behind you, or could support you in some way, shape, or form. So what can artists do to stand out in those situations?
Well, number one, just how you present yourself. So, how you dress that night, your conversation topics, how you introduce yourself, how you close out a conversation. Like, there's a lot that can be said again about those soft skills and those interpersonal skills. The common mistake that I feel like we make as Detroiters is that we assume everybody in the room are Detroiters and they're from Detroit. So off bill, we assume that the lingo is going to be understood. The modern topic is going to be understood. And sometimes, it might help to know what the weather is that day. It might help to know, some politics that's going on the national level. It might help to have, read a book or two. Sometimes you just never know where the conversation going to go when you're networking and fellowshipping and communing with people to kind of build that rapport. So I would tell people it don't hurt to pick up a newspaper every now and again. It don't hurt to pick up, some print media within the realm of music and entertainment. Pick up a Billboard magazine. Read a Vibe or Double XL every now and again. Go to allhiphop.com or locally DetroitRap.com. Shout out to them. Hip Hop DX, and just kind of make yourself versed of what's going on.
Right.
Because sometimes when you're informing and speaking on things, just in casual conversation, your perspective or your intuition and how you carry it can be your selling point. You may say something that impress somebody. And you don't get a second chance at the first impression.
Right. And shout out to P Dot and the Dot Gang. I noticed that during the last rollout that y'all had, y'all did some videos. I think you did some in Chicago, and you also did some in Philly. Were those fact-finding missions, or were there missions where those missions or trips where you had already developed relationships out of town and you just kind of went out there and you kind of cashed in on those relationships?
Yes and no. With the Chicago one, that's like my second home.
Okay.
As a younger kid, I was a student athlete. Did okay for myself. Played a lot of AAU basketball in Chicago. And then on some other side of the fence type of things, I got roots there.
Okay.
So Chicago was, like going home. So we definitely had our way around the city and moving around and doing what we was doing. Philly was kind of like a dream come true. Just being a fan of Philly from Rocky movies and understanding Philly culturally and what it means to hip hop, DJ Jazzy Jeff, Fresh Prince, The Roots, State Property, Meek Mill, Lil Uzi, everybody that come up out of Philly, just having, something in the water in Philly in terms of music and fighters in the boxing realm. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Joe Frazier, Front Street Gym.
Absolutely.
So it was like kind of a dream come true. So and that was just me following my creativity to keep it honest. When I come up with treatments for the videos that we do, a lot of it be inspired by things that I've been a fan of culturally my whole life. So I might pull from a scene in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and try to recreate that. Or I might pull from a favorite movie scene, one of my favorite movies, and try to recreate that. So I always tell my team, it's about the cultural references. You know what I'm saying? From a marketing standpoint, if you could show somebody something that's kind of familiar, but put your spin on it, it kind of makes it a little bit more digestible, in the early parts of the campaign before you hit them over the head with some out of the box stuff.
Okay. That's all I wanted to lift.
I got you. So moving along, these are some do's and don'ts that Mr. Wallace and Company asked me to stress. So what should an indie artist or a music impresario do? Number one, paperwork is important. So when it comes to your business name, your assumed name as an artist, all of those different varying points in which you operate under a certain identity, you need to either have it registered within your county, your locale, registered within your state. If you really want to take it full scale, you can register with the government across the 49 states in the U.S., not including your state. And it's all information online from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to your local business entity established within your locale. Create a company. That's number two. Everybody should have some level of their own organizational structure, and the easiest way to do business is to do it through a company for protection against you as the individual. So it's just a layer of protection for you. So if you ever have to deal with any legality issues, it can be against the company and not you. Just old school textbook trick. Open a business account for fiscal. Make sure that your money is flowing through so that you can keep track of it. And if you ever had to turn it in to the IRS, it's all there. Copyright, published, patent, kind of, I spoke on that earlier, number one, but basically make sure your paperwork is right. And understand that all of the above are not end all be alls. You can own all your stuff. You can have it all patented, trademark, copywritten, published, and somebody still, excuse my French, can jack your shit. And it's on you to sue them and serve them to fight for your right to say that I'm the original owner or author of that. And that's what we see a lot of times happen in the culture of hip hop on the national level, that once something gets to a certain point monetary wise, whether it was an uncleared sample or a sample that was used unbeknownst to the artist or company, or it's an issue with mastering, or it's an issue with authorship, it usually happens after the record has made money, because it takes money to go to war to be able to get that money. And nobody's going to sue anybody if they don't think it's an interest there or they can benefit from financially. And then again, invest in yourself. Can't stress that enough. You have to invest in yourself. Don'ts. Do not perform any business without having your own legal entity. You should not be under your legal government name doing business. You should be under some type of organization or company or assumed name that you own. Do not sign anything without doing proper research and understanding what you're signing. If you can, get a second or third look from a legal representative who's versed in that field.
Due diligence.
Yes. Agreement and contracts are easy to get into, but hard to get out of. Just ask Megan Thee Stallion. Just ask Cash Doll, Quality Control Music Group. Just to shout out for recent cases.
Every artist that they've made a movie about in the last 30 years. You know what I mean? For real. Cadillac Records, 5 Heartbeats, Disappearing Acts, all of them. So yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the unfortunate truth is that when we get to this side of the fence, a lot of this has to do with personal integrity. And like I said, fundamental understanding about just common sense. You know, if something don't feel right, if something don't seem right, 9 out of 10, you're not supposed to do it. But it's hard to say what you would do when you got a check sitting in front of you, or a brown paper bag, or a trash bag, if you will, sitting in front of you full of money, or somebody giving you the keys to a home, or keys to a new car, or opening up a box full of jewelry. You know, for somebody that comes from very unfortunate circumstances, it's hard to say what you would do under that type of pressure. So it's really a question of integrity, you know, in terms of what we're talking about right now. How solid is your integrity? Lastly, you should not release anything without properly having the paperwork, because a lot of my clientele, about 60% of my clientele, are people who've put out music and literally left money on the table because it wasn't properly published or copywritten, or it was some clog in the process that they didn't complete business-wise, and they found out later on how much money they could have earned. So they're trying to double back to try to preserve that and get future monies, and if they can, recap the money they lost. So definitely, if you feel like something has the potential to go, make sure you have your paperwork in order before you drop it.
And you have, I'm sorry, go ahead, brother. Go ahead. I'm sorry. That last point is important.
We got time, man. Go ahead. What you about to say?
I was just gonna say, you know, and we have it just goes back to what you said about planning. And I think when people are making music when people do not necessarily operate with an infrastructure for music, they view the preparation of the music, and I'm guilty of this too at times. They view the preparation of the music and the finish, the completion of the performance as this last step before the music is released, when customarily the completion of the performance, I'm talking about the recording, mixing, mastering of the album, that is not the final step. There are so many boxes that have to be ticked afterwards that I think a lot of times, like people who make music like I do, they give themselves dates in order to ensure that they finish that part of the process. But in actuality, it hasn't been patented, it hasn't been copyrighted, it hasn't been published, and it's all of a sudden it's out and it's on DistroKid and it's up.
Yeah,
So
bare minimum, at least publish it if you don't do all of the other stuff. Because honestly, the copyright is more so for authorship. It doesn't really serve a financial means. So it's just to prove that if you're ever in a situation where somebody trying to use your work or recreate your work, that you are the original author beyond, showing a date stamp on a master, in court. So that's really what the copyright is about. But the publishing, it kind of functions as a form of a copyright, so to speak, colloquially, because once you register that song through a pro, whatever time stamp is on that, that's the date of it being an original work. And then it also serves the purpose of helping you get back end money, aka mailbox checks outside of your distribution royalties, depending on what you use independently to submit the record through. So
I want you to make this next point because I got a question about that too.
Yeah. Friends and family discount. Unfortunately, a lot of times, a lot of us start out with people that we grew up with, people that we've been knowing our whole lives, and we feel like just in general, we can trust them because they know our dreams, they know our passions, they know what fuels us. But oftentimes you find out that with friends and family along the way, those are the people who generally get weird on you first, especially when you get any type of real success, you make any type of money. People count your pockets, people want your position, or you didn't allow me to do this, you only gave me this to do, and they might feel like what they're doing is beneath them. I mean, all of the above things that kind of go on with, dealing with friends and family. So you can try to hire people that's actually got a skill set and what you need to build your infrastructure.
I've read different things that especially when a person is starting out, that they have to find people that believe in them. Find
Absolutely.
people that believe in you first.
Absolutely.
Who can assist you. But they have a half-life. You will start to be a part of conversations and things that they will not have the skill set to participate in. So you have the argument of especially amongst our people and the people who we deal with, you have the concept of the day ones, you know what I'm saying, versus bringing different people to the table that have different skills, and then you can be kind of accused of switching up. And authenticity is very important. Authenticity in relationships is very important in terms of a lot of people who are rotating around music. So can you just speak a little bit more to that? Like,
it's all in I guess how you do it. So one of my best examples that I use for that, rest in heaven, and Nipsey Hussle. I was a fan of Nipsey Hussle since 2005 when he first got off the porch with Slauson Boy Volume 1.
Okay.
And watching his trajectory from when he had a situation with Epic Records and was being managed by Steve Lobel and Big U, and the Cinematic Music Group was Johnny Shipes. So when he had to go back to the drawing board and had to figure it out again, he really sat down and built his all money in infrastructure with his brother. And he approached it from a business standpoint. So it was more about how can I legitimize my investing and my funding for my music career without necessarily leaning on illegal activity. And the best thing they did was create a merch line and use that merch line to not only make money, but brand him as an artist with the whole marathon clothing push, and in particular, the line item of Crenshaw. The Crenshaw hats, the Crenshaw t-shirts, Crenshaw sweatshirts. And they started out just having a boutique table set up at the swap meet. Then that grew into having a small storefront. Then that grew into having a major storefront. And it grew into having an actual retail store, hence the Marathon Clothing. And his whole vision was that the Marathon Clothing would be equivalent to what we know of with the Apple Music Store, where not only just clothing, but music releases as well could all be curated through the Marathon clothing store, and he wanted to have one in every major market. And that was really his real base vision outside of what he did in the community, his philanthropy, outside of the Dr. CB documentary that allegedly he was working on at the time of his demise. But it was really about enterprising to where he wouldn't have to use a TuneCore or a DistroKid or any of the DSPs. If you wanted that new greatest Nipsey Hussle, just go to your local Marathon clothing store, and right there you direct to consumer. Rather than going to book himself out of venues across the US, I'm gonna do in-store pop-up shops and in-store performances for my core fan base outside of the Marathon clothing store. So when we talk about infrastructure and we talk about planning, you know, he was ahead of the game with that. You know what I'm saying? Well beyond his years and understanding. And so when it comes to the family and friends thing, he had to have somebody working the cashier drawer. He had to have somebody stocking the shelves. He had to have somebody picking up from the manufacturer to bring the product inside of the store. He had to have somebody handling the marketing for the store and doing the website. So when you talk about family and friends, they don't all necessarily have to be hands-on,
right,
which in the studio, they don't have to move around with you as entourage. They don't have to be your security. Like, you can employ them by creating a legitimate business and giving them legitimate business roles and putting them on payroll and putting them on salary. And that will empower them because now they have equity in what's going on. You know what I'm saying? They're going to take more pride because they understand, okay, this store runs because of us, or, you know, this event runs because of us.
right.
Versus just being somebody who's a part of the entourage that's getting groupie love or getting some backstage access. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the how you do it. You know what I'm saying? So it's a way to incorporate friends and family in a manner that's non-traditional, to where it won't breed jealousy or envy or greed. But we all know the laundry tales of, you know, those things happening because there is no real infrastructure. You kind of just got people that just hanging around and being involved in what's going on.
Absolutely.
So that's just a tangible example and a real example of what I would say, like, you know, something that can be done to mitigate that. You know, you basically just want to give your people something solid to do and something that's within their wheelhouse to do. You know,
and an example of how complex.
To operate heavy machinery, they can't deal with heavy machinery.
Right. But I think what you offered was the fact that music should be, and you can tell me if you disagree or not, music should not be, I should say, the end all be all to what you can do. Music should be part of what your, if your interest is in the entrepreneurial role as a musician, music cannot be the only focus that you have. Music can be a vehicle for promotion, or go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'll say the unfortunate truth is that music alone is not enough anymore. Like, we probably outgrew that phase in the golden era of the 90s with the success of Bad Boy and Death Row and No Limit and Cash Money later on to close the decade. But, you know, it's not enough just to be an artist anymore. It's about enterprising. So that's why 360 deals exist. Understand what I'm saying? Like, that's why they want not just royalties for music. They want publishing, they want touring, they want merchandising, they want brand extensions. That's why those things is in place, because the pie is bigger and there's more ways to earn. Like, that is the music business. The music business is just that, business. It just so happens to be that the business at hand is selling and pushing music as a conduit to all these other streams of income. And like I said, that fundamental breakdown mentally that people get in thinking about the music to begin with and feeling like, okay, as long as I'm making records and performing records and to some degree selling records, I'm okay. And it's like, no, because everybody has their window of when they're hot. Even Drake cooled off at some point in time. When you play close to Drake transition You know, when he started going through them real contract battles behind the scenes with trying to figure out who to pay, because he had 5 different people in his pocket. You know, he gave us singles and albums that was made out of playlists, allegedly, versus real locked in original material where he sat down with his team and cooked up. You know, if you look at those releases, he had, if you was reading It's Too Late, that was deemed a mixtape. A couple offshoot projects with Future that was deemed as mixtapes. A lot of singles. More Dreams was considered a playlist, not an album or a mixtape.
More Life.
Yeah, More Life.
Yeah.
But then he came to Scorpion at one point in time, and then before Scorpion, he had Views, which Views and Scorpion are considered traditional albums. But it's like at least 2 to 3 years, or in some cases 3 to 4 years in between those projects, because he needed time to work out the business. You had to figure out, you know, how to get out the contract or renegotiate the contract, how to take back more equity in what he was doing. Because coming to the game, just keeping it a buck, everybody shines a shit deal to some degree. Like your first deal is going to be terrible because you're at a disadvantage because the industry has the leverage. Unless you, even in the case of Drake, who had a bidding war and had one of the most known bidding wars of the last decade, and then before him, you had the Jeezy and Rick Ross bidding war at Def Jam, and before that, you had the 50 Cent bidding war with Interscope and others. So it's like these documented moments and times of serious buzz. Even with that, I will argue to say that 50 Cent made it out the best in terms of being able to launch his G-Unit brand the way he did in the same year, dropping Get Rich or Die Trying, getting the signing bonus that he got at the time, and then immediately launching the careers of the affiliates of G-Unit and them all selling platinum out the gate. We haven't seen that type of trajectory from a new artist, let alone a new production company with that artist, with new talent that was viable in over almost 20 years. We've seen good talent come out as an extension of an already established brand. We haven't seen a brand new talent like just shoot to the races like that off bill. And you gotta understand, at that time, Interscope was a huge machine. You know, the machines.
Do you think that, and I know we getting off script, but do you think that's purposeful? Because, you know, you got the huge distribution deals involved in, you know, Cash Money and No Limit in the 90s. You had 50 Cent who, you know, was really one of the ending parts of the label deal, you know, the getting a label deal as you sign. Do you believe that, and do you believe that that was purposeful by major labels to say, let's kind of scale back on trying to give everybody their own independent label?
Yeah, because the industry was going broke. I mean, away from the transition from cassettes and vinyl and CD to MP3 and now DSP. At that time, you got to remember, budgets was inflated, man. Like you had $1 million videos. Like one video was $1 million. Like $1 million budgets. You know, budgets $2-3 million. Like they was just blowing money. And you know, when the whole streaming MP3 wave hit and they lost so much money due to all the share sites, you know, LimeWire back in the day, Kazaa, you know, that was some of my early high school and college days making mixtapes, no pun intended. I was bootleg Scarber before I was ASR Soda.
I think everybody paid their bootleg dues. You know, if you had the access, you was burning the CDs. I mean, you know, so
that's just what the time was. But the music industry lost a lot of money during that time, allegedly. So, I mean, with all that being said, like, and you got to think about the deals that Master P and the Williams brothers got was largely based on their ability to show their prominence as an independent. So that kind of get back to my point with Nipsey Hussle. Cash Money already had a regional infrastructure when they took that deal. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got the deal that they got because they was already selling 100,000, which is ghetto gold, out the trunk. For multiple projects. Master P was doing 100,000, multiple projects. So they didn't necessarily have to take the deal, but they took it to broaden their base. So it's like that's a fundamental, like I said, understanding that gets kind of swept under the rug is that, okay, yeah, they got these great deals, but why did they get these great deals? They got these great deals because they came to the table with some business leverage. It wasn't just about being a dope rapper or having the hottest bars. It was about business. Like they proved they could legitimately sell records on their own.
So, I think right now we're up here. You know what I'm saying? If we center it back down to the artist that believes they have talent, I don't want to take away from the rest of your presentation.
No,
but the artist who believes that they have, the artist who believes in themselves, people who are around, I want to kind of center it back on them. But I'll let you continue. But by the end, I want to kind of center it back on that person that's just recording and what their next steps are to begin to establish that infrastructure.
Yep.
But
so that kind of ties in with this slide. So another thing I was asked to address was COVID and its effects on future business. So live performances, obviously, we missed out a lot on, and a great deal in 2020. And we had the development of live streams, platforms like we're using right now, like StreamYard, like Zoom, in which people curated content and brought the music inside of the homes and computers and laptops and phones of their fan base. So I think this is here to stay. I think streaming content, whether pre-recorded or live, is going to be a part of the wave of how we do performances in the future. I do think we're going to get back to some in-person performances, but what that looks like, is still unknown. So that's definitely a huge effect and a huge question mark that we all have to solve collectively from an independent level all the way up to the majors. Social media, not sure of how many people follow the whole TikTok blowout this year, last year in terms of what TikTok was able to do. But TikTok now is in a position to where they're curating music similar to how digital streaming platforms curate music. And from my understanding, they're already in bed with the labels. And there's like a 24-hour period for the artists that they're supporting where the content will live on TikTok for people to make videos to kind of help break the record and make the record go viral versus just sending it directly to Apple Music and Tidal with exclusive tracks. Back in the day, it was about, submitting to these DSPs and then giving certain DSPs exclusivity, whether they would be able to give you the album artwork with the credits ahead of schedule or giving them a couple bonus cuts that's not on the version that might be on another platform, or packaging it with a video release or a documentary release to kind of get that exclusivity to the streaming platform to increase subscribership for the people that subscribe to that platform, and just helping the platform at the same time marketing the artist. And so TikTok is definitely, at the forefront from a social media standpoint. There's reels that's on Instagram and Facebook where you can make reels to your music as a way of promoting it. There's Facebook and IG advertisements that you can pay for. But I just think social media, if we're not careful, we may look up and that might be the new way to release music. Instead of putting it on Apple Music or Tidal, you would just release it through Facebook or release it through IG. I think that's very plausible, and that's on the horizon. So the more social media savvy you become as an independent artist is nothing but a plus. Like, learn it, master it.
It's here to stay.
Yeah. Curation in terms of podcasts, internet radio, satellite radio. I think we're moving more into that space. What you're doing right now on the platform that we're on. I think traditional radio will still be around because of advertising dollars, but I think the number of radio stations will continue to decline on that level and kind of become more centralized. But I think the rise of podcasts, internet radio, and satellite radio is definitely here to stay, because it's a two-way street. It's more accessibility for independent artists to get on these platforms without having to go through a lot of headache or red tape or dealing with payola in some cases. And then, in the words of Noriega, if you a solid individual or artist, you can start your own podcast, which can be a marketing tool to bring awareness to what you got going on. So absolutely, I think curating content in terms of things outside of traditional radio are here to stay. Critics, we've seen the critic go from print media to blogs to now vlogs on YouTube. And I think that and how it plays into self-champion and self-validation. You know, everybody feel like they the illest nigga in Nebraska. Excuse my French. But in some cases, you know, some stuff is whack. But back in the day, you had a critic that everyone respected, so to speak, that gave you the pulse of what's going on. You know, I remember the days of living by the unsigned hype and the five mics in the source.
Absolutely.
I remember the days of the countdown on the radio, the top 8 at 8 on F98, and those were supposed to have been the hottest records at the time. I remember, you know, the countdown on the video channels, the top 10 on 106 and Park, the top 10 or top 20 on Yo MTV Raps. You know, we don't have a true critic no more. I think the younger generation has alienated the critic, and it's more about the vibe and the wave of music than the critical acclaim of music.
That's interesting.
You know, where is the musicianship? Where is the craftsmanship? Where is the merit and artistic value? Now it's more about, you know, whatever I can microwave and put out to make a money and get to the hustle of it. That's where the focus is now. So,
what do you think about that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing in your eyes? I mean, from the management perspective, like that, you know, critical acclaim, what does it mean for, does critical acclaim equal to a good marketing plan in the current climate?
Yes and no, because the last time I checked, Grammy nominated is just as good as Grammy Award winning. Like that can boost sales.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So yes, critical acclaim to some degree still matter, but I would be remiss to say that, you know, like we said earlier with 360 deals and just the commerce of music, it's the music business. We in the game to make money. So there's been plenty of times as a manager where I've made decisions for the sake of commerce, and on the inside, the fan in me cringed because I wasn't a fan of the music, but I understood how it worked business-wise. And that's just, you know, a tough battle that we find ourselves in sometimes. Yeah. You know, with the business of it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, what you were just talking about, labels. Do labels still matter? Yes. I think there's something to be said about infrastructure and building an artist in terms of marketing and brand awareness with a major label that, in my opinion, even with buildings gradually on an independent level, the fast tracking way labels can build and break an artist in terms of branding and marketing and putting them with the right brand extensions, I think there's still value in being on a major label. Definitely the budget access in terms of upfront capital, you know, that's still value in that. But I think it's just a thin line, again, of understanding what you sign and what's in the contract and, you know, what you're being held accountable for. But,
you know,
definitely think yourself is vital, you know, to all the other points that we've been addressing. So the more information that you can know, the more that you can study and show yourself improve, you know, the more of an advantage you will have overall. So I think both are still viable, you know, in the new ecosystem that we're in right now.
So the parallel that I draw to it is, and fantastic job. Thank you so much for everything, man. But
no problem.
When it comes to the label, you know, I've the parallel I draw is that the label used to be like the auto, like an auto company, like General Motors. Mm-hmm. They built the car, they painted the car, they marketed the car, they sold the car. You paid GMAC to finance the car until they chose to stop making the car because the car wasn't selling. But what I see now is I see these entities like potentially like an ASIR being almost like a car wash where you can come in and you can get whatever your situation is, or almost like a mechanic, almost like an oil change. Mm-hmm. You can get whatever your situation is addressed. Like you go on the oil change, they can tell you if your oil leaking, they can put an air filter in your car, they can pump your tires up, they can do whatever, and then they send you on your way. And I see consulting companies and companies like yourself being able to take an artist and take a project, oversee the rollout, ensure that all of the documentation is there, ensure that the artist is be able to potentially provide management or booking or design elements for the artist, and then be able to send them on their way
Right.
for a chip of publishing, for in order to get cashed out. I think it's just different. I think so what you do is nuanced, man. You know, and you have the ability to provide the support, because again, it go back to that term infrastructure. The labels used to provide that infrastructure, but to a large degree, it was predatory. But you standing on, I'm gonna provide you with a service that's going to allow you to continue to operate independently, and either, yeah, you know, you I could take publishing dollars if that's the agreement, or you can cash me out. But other than that, it's still up to you to move your feet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's I always say it's not an end all be all, and music is very much a gray area because yes, labels were predatory. The industry overall is predatory, and
Yeah.
even on the independent level, we talk about things like janky promoters. We talk about things like you
Yeah.
know blood oath deals, so to speak, like
Yeah.
and being caught up in crazy independent production company contracts where you didn't sign your whole life away because you couldn't afford to pay for studio time at a certain point in time. Like the industry is predatory by nature. So that's why I say, like, for me, in deciding to create ASAR, it was really my battle cry, my war cry for the underdog, for the concept of what the underdog meant to me in the independent space, and just wanting to help because I realized a lot of the experience I had early on with Varsity Music Group, with the first couple waves of talent that we had, it's just fundamental breakdowns and just basic understandings how this thing go on the independent level. So I was like, well, I invested a lot of money. I didn't make a lot of money in the first 3 to 4 years of me doing this. And so definitely on a personal level, having a wife at the time, family, kids, you got to justify that time away from home. You got to justify that commerce away from home. And at the time, I didn't have an answer because I was dreaming. I was, investing in my dream. But then when I stepped behind the scenes and started to provide a service and became a proprietor of a service, not only one that I saw the money issues, I started making money, and my publishing catalog grew even more. I realized that it's just a lot of people that's out here in the blind, and unfortunately, in a city like Detroit, it's very predatory. You know what I'm saying? People prey on what you don't know. They prey on, making you feel inferior. They prey on, having the upper hand in every aspect of doing business. So I've always considered myself to be a equalizer and a balancer, if you will, within the ecosystem in Detroit, and just try to do my best to keep people armed with information and armed with tangible things that they could do to protect themselves on a local level, just so they can have peace of mind with what they're doing. Because if you're making money, just keeping it plain off of what you're doing weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, you're successful. Now that can be hundreds of dollars, that can be thousands of dollars, that can be millions of dollars. But if you are actually in a position to earn, consistent money over time, and you have a base of people that support your business, whether you're an artist, label, or you're providing a service, you are
Podcast.
successful. Yeah,
Absolutely.
you are successful.
Absolutely.
So I think getting people comfortable on an independent level and understanding that infrastructure of I invest this in, I get this out, and then growing that's the first major step, just in the consultant space and just in the managerial space. It's helping people understand it don't take a lot to breed commerce. It just takes discipline. And that's one of the hardest things to do. But when we're talking about, like I said, majors and just the industry at large, yes, it's very predatory. This game is not for the weak and meek pocket. This game is not for the soft skin. It's definitely tough love. It's definitely tough skin. Sometimes you may have to get your hands a little dirty. Sometimes you have to mask up and black gloves. Sometimes, depending on the situation. The industry is very predatory, and it preys on people's inability to stand strong, inability to have integrity, and inability to have identity for self. Like this industry gives you an identity, so to speak. People who might not have been a cool kid in school automatically become a great rapper. And so fame in and of itself is a handicap and a slave mentality in and of itself, because people never had to experience fame before, so they're just trapped in fame. Like we see that story of crashing and burning all the time.
All the time.
And we see that all the time.
All the time. Right. So we want so thank again, Brandon Scarber. Thank you. Thank you so much. We want our people to educate themselves. We want our people to work together and have the biggest thing I'm taking away is you have to have a long-term vision. You have to have a vision above and beyond the record that you're making, above and beyond the song that you're writing. If you plan to be successful in music, you have to really consider the position that you want to play, because it is definitely an avenue towards being successful. And I think for people who grew up like we did, especially younger people, it's for some it's viewed as being the way out, but they still have to be strategic and they have to acknowledge the realities of the game. So my hope is that they watch this and that they can extract from you the fact that they have to learn, they have to be able to create strong relationships on their own. They have to be careful about who they choose to associate themselves with. And they have to strive to build them, be the best them that they can be. Because you are a brand, from what you put on your social media to the relationships that you develop with people, to every performance, to every engagement and interaction you have. Is very important that they're cognizant of how important all of those things are. Am I on target with that?
Yep. Like I said before, you don't get a second chance. Absolutely. At a first impression. And it's about being efficient. I call it the 3 E's: being efficient, being equitable, and execution. You know what I'm saying? Just doing your best to always, set a target and try to hit the mark.
Absolutely.
Challenging yourself to be the best creative you can be, challenging yourself to be the best business person or businesswoman or man you could be, and just having that center. If you have a belief in spirituality or in the higher power, just having that center in what you do, so that when you're going through your storms and you're going through your ups and downs, you got something that hold it together for you, because it's going to be challenges along the way. Sometimes if you have too much success early on, you're competing with your own success and the perception and interpretation of that. And that can be very stressful on the mind as well, in terms of mental health awareness. So it's always something to overcome. It's always something to get through. But like I said, having that peace of mind along the way will make it more pleasurable and more of a journey than not. And the last thing I did want to mention too is financial freedom early on. And that's why I speak a lot about fiscal responsibility, with being an entrepreneur in this, because if you can come into this game having some level of financial freedom, your journey is going to be easier versus somebody who's coming into this game and looking at this as a primary source of income. So if you come in where this is not your primary source of income and you're literally working off of what you have to quote unquote be extra, your journey mentally and emotionally is going to be more fulfilling to start versus someone who's coming in looking at this as a primary source, because your mentality is already do or die. Your mentality is already, it's a hustle.
Survival.
So it becomes less about doing your best and more about what can I do to get on. So
absolutely. I'm glad you
my final takeaway.
So any plugs that you got? Can you tell people how to get in contact with you?
Absolutely. Brandon Scarber, real name, no gimmick. Shout out to Old Trice. I borrowed them from him. You can follow me on social media at Brandon Scarber on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You just type that in, you will find me. More specifically, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is at GrindLife313. There's GrindLife, Life, Grind Life, one word, 313. I'm on LinkedIn, so all the major social platforms I'm available. For the talent that I'm currently managing and working with and partnering with, you can go to our YouTube page at ASIR Consulting on YouTube and see the latest visuals. You can also see my podcast, Four Corners Podcast, and see my get down with that on the journalism side of things. Shout out to my former partners, Detroit Rap. I definitely am heavy supporters of what they do with the site.
Absolutely.
Shout out 7 Mile Radio, shout out Grove Studios, and some other people, the Connected Experience Podcast, Shop Talk Podcast, people that I deal with, Silent Riot Studios, Mix Factory, Isolation. Shout out everybody over there. 36 Vision, BZ Films. And shout out everybody, man. Shout out everybody that I've worked with in the past. You know, people that I'm currently working with now. And like I said, hopefully I was a blessing to those who tuned in tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all I got, man.
Absolutely. Please consider supporting the creative community and help Grove Studios recover from the COVID-19 shutdown by giving a suggested donation of $5 to $10 at the Cash App link that I put up a little bit earlier. Drop it right back down at the bottom again. Amplify Fellowship is continuing to move forward. We're looking forward to the release of the projects for the 3 fellows, London Beck, Danny Darling, and Kenyatta Rashawn. They should be coming out soon. Follow Amplify, the Amplify Project. Follow Amplify Washtenaw on Instagram and the Amplify Project on Facebook. We're doing some fantastic things. We got some great events that's going to be coming up. So make sure that you follow us there. Again, thank you to Brandon Scarber for visiting with us today and sharing your expertise. Peace. Thank you very much.